Good evening, everyone. Tonight's Drasha for Parshas Behar-Bechukotai, Tavshin Pei, should be a merit for a foolish shlemer for all those that were ill. The merit that Hashem should take away this challenging situation that we find ourselves in now due to COVID-19. And today's Drasha is being sponsored by Rochelle and Burton Goldner to commemorate the yahrzeit of Ephraim ben Moshe Aryeh, whose yahrzeit is this coming Shabbos. So in this week's parsha, we have the mitzvah of Yovel, which is that after we know that there is a mitzvah of Shemitah every 7 years. On the 7th year, the land of Israel is to lay fallow. And after 7 cycles, after 49 years, we have the 50th Jubilee year, known in Hebrew as the Yovel, which is also another year that we lay the ground fallow. What is unique about Yovel is the fact that in the Yovel year, the Jubilee year, any Jewish slave goes automatically free. A Jewish slave is automatically sold. A Jew can be sold as a slave to a fellow Jew for a automatic 6-year period. After the 6-year period, if the Jewish slave wants to continue with his master, there's a process by which he or she will remain a slave until the Jubilee year. Were the Jubilee year to fall out within those first 6 years, or when the Jubilee year comes for the slave who's staying longer, they automatically go free. Another aspect of the Yovel is that a piece of land that was bought, a family had a piece of land, part of their inheritance, going back for generations from when the Jewish people first entered the land of Israel, and they were forced under certain circumstances to sell their land. In the Yovel year, the land returned, again, under certain depending on the circumstances, the land would return to its original owner. These are the two things that take place in the Yovel year. They actually occur on Yom Kippur of that year. And what happens on Yom Kippur of that year is that the shofar is blown. Just like we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar on that Yom Kippur, which we commemorate at the end of every Yom Kippur that we have now. We blow a shofar to commemorate the Yovel year. When the Yovel year was an actual, was in effect, they blow the shofar, and once they blew the shofar, the Jewish slaves would go free, and the land would return to its original owner. And the Sefer HaChinuch talks about this mitzvah, blowing the shofar on the Yovel. And the Sefer HaChinuch explains, first, that the purpose of the blowing of the shofar, as we just said before, was to publicize the freedom of the Jewish slaves. And he speaks out that the blowing of the shofar on Yovel is different than the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah in its reason or in its purpose. He says that the Rosh Hashanah shofar, we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, is to commemorate Akedas Yitzchak, when Hashem told Abraham Avinu, our forefather Abraham, to sacrifice his son Yitzchak, Isaac, as a sacrifice. And he was ready to do so. And Isaac was ready to give himself up as a sacrifice. And at the end, God sent an angel to Abraham telling him not to sacrifice his son. And in place of his son, Abraham sacrificed an ayal, a ram. So the ram's horn of Rosh Hashanah that we blow is to commemorate Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, which the Sefer HaChinuch explains on Rosh Hashanah. We blow the shofar. We're blowing the shofar to imagine and think about Akedas Yitzchak. And just as Yitzchak was ready to give up his life for Hashem, and Avram was ready to sacrifice Yitzchak's lives for Hashem, that we too would be willing to give up our lives for Hashem, just as Yitzchak was. And when we think about that, that is a merit for us that Hashem should judge us favorably on Rosh Hashanah, because if he sees that we're sincere and willing to be so committed that we'd give up our lives for him, just as Yitzchak's life, Yitzchak was ready to give up his life to Hashem, that becomes a merit for us on the Day of Judgment. That is the point of the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. When we blow the shofar in Rosh Hashanah to remember the binding of Yitzchak, it's so that we think about that we would be willing to do the same thing that Yitzchak was, and that becomes a merit for us on a day of judgment on Rosh Hashanah. But the Yovel, the shofar blowing on Yovel, says the Chinuch, is not because of that. It's a different reason. Its purpose is different. Its purpose is to publicize the fact that the slaves go free and that the land returns to its owners. Now, the Sefer Chinuch always takes a mitzvah and explains a reason, a message behind it. And he explains that the message of the blowing of the shofar is on Yovel is the following. He says it's known that it's well known that that a blow of a shofar actually is something that can arouse people, whether it's in a time of peace or a time of war. It's a call. It's a call to come together. It's a rallying call. And when it comes to Yovel, the Jewish people need to come together. They need to rally together. Why? Because if you think about it, you have this Jewish slave. He may have now been part of this household for a number of years. Don't forget, he may have been there for 6 years, decided to stay longer. His total of being there was 50 years. Even if, let's say, it happens earlier than that, there's a number of years by which this slave can be here. And for the master to allow this slave to go free is very, very difficult. And as a matter of fact, historically speaking, there were periods of our history where the Yovel year would take place and they wouldn't let the slaves go free. It was too hard for them to do. Therefore, says the Sefer Chinuch, the Torah gave us a mitzvah of blowing the shofar on Yovel, to inspire, to arouse the hearts of people regarding this matter, to encourage them, to strengthen them, and to exhort them to do this mitzvah, allowing the slaves to go free when they hear the sound of the shofar. Because when the shofar blows, what that does to people is it reminds them that this is something that is happening to everyone throughout the land. And everybody's doing so because we've all been commanded about it. There is nothing that will strengthen a person like the fact that many people are doing the same thing. As the saying goes, when the community suffers, when others are suffering with you, that in itself is a comfort. The blowing of the shofar on Yovel is a rallying call, but it's a rallying call to say that, look, we're all in this together. No one is alone going through this. No one is alone in this challenging situation. We all are doing it together. We're all in it, and we're all in it together. And that is what encourages and strengthens a person to do this difficult thing. Because when he knows he's not alone, he knows he's in it with everybody else, and everybody else has to do the same thing as he does, then that gives him the strength to overcome the challenges that he's facing. Then he also adds, Gam ha'eved ba'atzma mis'ara l'tzeis kachalo avadim, b'ta'ach stei rabbi, asher ahav, b'shemet kol shofar. Even the slave himself needs this. He's gotten so used to being by the master that he doesn't want to leave, perhaps. And Hashem wants everything to go back to the way it's supposed to be. A person should not be enslaved into another fellow Jew. Every person should be independent. There are certain circumstances that make it that a fellow Jew will be enslaved to another Jew, that a Jew will be enslaved to a fellow Jew. But people, that's not the way things are meant to be. And Hashem wants people to be free. And therefore, the slave also can be facing a challenge to go free because he's so used to it. He loves it here. So therefore, he too hears the shofar. And he also sees and realizes he's not the only one that's going through this. And that gives him the strength to do what he needs to do. So it's interesting that the fact that you just know that everybody's in it, that's not enough. You need the blow of the shofar. You need a rallying call. You need something, you You need a rallying cry, something that's going to inspire you and arouse you to this idea that you're not alone, that you're in this with everybody else. And that gives you the strength to deal with the challenging situation. So when I saw this, the first thing that came to my mind was here the Sefer Chinuch is telling us how important it is. There's nothing more that strengthens someone than doing things together with others. You're not just doing it yourself. You're in it with everybody else. And we don't have that right now. Due to COVID-19, we're in many ways all on our own. Now it's true. There are times where we do come together. There are times where we come together to help others when possible and necessary. And we rally together under these circumstances to do a mitzvah. The fact that we come together online to learn together, that's coming together. This is not the typical situation. But knowing that we can come together and do it together strengthens us. Today we had a beautiful bar mitzvah that again was celebrated by over 100 people online. Again, not the normal way to celebrate, but everybody comes together to celebrate together. It's a tremendous inspiration. It's tremendous encouragement to be able to face the challenges that we find. When there are many circumstances, many situations, opportunities even, under the present situation we find ourselves, where we can come together and strengthen ourselves in these trying circumstances to do what we need to do. But in many ways, we don't have it. We can't daven together, come to shul together. We can't learn face-to-face. We can't celebrate face-to-face. We can't, when a person is sitting shiva chas v'shalom, we can't come face-to-face with them. We don't seem to, in many ways, we don't have what the Sefer Chinuch is telling us. We don't have that opportunity where we all come together and do something together and gain the strength and inspiration and energy that comes with that. Apparently, as we mentioned many times before, that's not what the Rebbeinu Shalom, what the Almighty wants from us right now. What He wants from us right now is that we should turn our homes into a shul, and turn our homes into a base medrash, our study hall, and to turn our homes into a school where children are learning Torah and studying. He wants to see what we can do on our own. He wants to see that the strength to do His service can come from within us. Why He wants that? We don't know. But it's quite apparent that that's what Hashem wants. He wants to see what we can do on our own. And there's something to consider when we talk about this idea that, say, we can't daven together. Hashem wants us to daven on our own. We can't learn together. Hashem wants us to learn on our own. That actually, when we are, as much as the Sefer Chinuch says, that there's nothing that strengthens a person more than doing things together with others, there's a danger in that also. And the danger is that sometimes we just get caught up in the flow of what everybody else is doing. We just follow along. We're not doing the service from within ourselves together with others. We're just going with the flow. And perhaps something that we can gain in this situation when we have to stand on our own 2 feet is actually, again, to find the strength from within to do Hashem service, so that when, Emetz Hashem, soon we go back to the way things are. We're supposed to daven together. We're supposed to learn together. But perhaps what we can also gain from this situation of when we have to stand on our own 2 feet is that when we come back together and we inspire each other and encourage each other and give ourselves the energy from one another to do a mitzvah, then we won't just be going with the flow, but rather, even then, everything will start from within. The strength to serve Hashem will come from within, and it'll be even more energized by the fact of doing it with others. It's clear Hashem wants us to do a lot on our own now. But what we can take from that is that even in the future, which again, hopefully soon we'll be back together again, that again, whatever we'll be doing will be coming from within. We won't just be going with the flow. We won't just be going with the flow, but rather we'll be standing on our own 2 feet amongst everyone else and being energized even more from doing things together. Now, another interesting point to make about the blowing of the shofar and Yovel is that even though Sefer Chinuch tells us that the blowing of the shofar and Yovel is the point of it is different than the reason or the point of blowing the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, nonetheless, we blow the shofar both times the same way. Even though in Shul and Yom Kippur, when we blow, the typical custom is just one straight blow. That's not the blowing of the shofar and Yovel when Yovel was in effect, when Yovel was actually being practiced. Without a Beis HaMikdash or a Holy Temple, there is no practicing of Yovel. The shofar is blown the same way as in Rosh Hashanah. You've got the shvarim, the straight sound, the chura, the broken sound, the shvarim, the straight sound, the exact same way. So it's interesting. If the point of Yovel was just a rallying cry to make sure that we all get inspired and realize we're on this together, so why blow it like Rosh Hashanah? Just blow. Just make that rallying cry. Why do we need to blow the shofar and Yovel just as we do in Rosh Hashanah if there's 2 different ideas to them? So my friend brings down from his Sefer Binyan Av that explains that yes, essentially, the essential nature of the blowing of the shofar and Yovel is different than the nature of why we blow on Rosh Hashanah. But we do want to think about Rosh Hashanah, and we do want to think about the point of the shofar and Rosh Hashanah on Yovel. On Yovel, we should also be reminded of the Akedat Sitzrak, of the binding of Isaac. Not because we have to go through the same thing that in our minds we imagine that we would be doing the same thing as Yitzchak did. Not because of that, but to remember what Abraham and Yitzchak did and how they were ready to sacrifice their lives. Yitzchak had sacrificed his life. Abraham was ready to sacrifice the life of his one and only son for Hashem. They were ready to do the ultimate self-sacrifice. And that should be an inspiration for us when we also have to go through the self-sacrifice of giving up the slave. It's a sacrifice. It's difficult. He was so much part of our lives. We gained materially so much from him. To give it up is not easy. That's also part of our self-sacrifice for Hashem. We remember the ultimate self-sacrifice of Avraham Yitzchak, of our forefathers, to remind us and inspire ourselves that it's in our blood. Self-sacrifice is part of who we are. We can do it. And we can fulfill this mitzvah that Hashem wants, that the Jewish slave should go back to where he belongs as a totally free person. So we blow the shofar on Yovel the same way as on Rosh Hashanah, because again, on Yovel, we still, even though the purpose is to announce and publicize the freeing of the slaves, we still want to be reminded also of Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of the Yitzchak, to inspire ourselves and remind ourselves how self-sacrifice is part of who we are. It's part of our spiritual DNA. And from that, draw strength to be able to do this difficult task of letting the slave go free. As Rabbi Ephraim points out, in Shema we say every day, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, you shall love Hashem your God, v'chol levavcha, with all your heart, v'chol nafshcha, with all your soul, v'chol me'odecha, and with all your possessions. V'chol nafshcha, with all your soul, the Mishnah teaches us means, and this is what we're supposed to think about when we say Shema, to love Hashem with all your soul means that you're even ready to give up your soul for God, for the love of Hashem. If the circumstances call for giving up your life for Hashem, you're ready to do so. That's a v'chol nafshcha, with all your soul. And then there is to love Hashem v'chol me'odech, with all your possessions. You should be ready to give up from your possessions to express your love of Hashem. So as my friend points out, on Rosh Hashanah, the blowing of the shofar is about v'chol nafshcha, with all your soul, being ready to give up your life for Hashem. On Yovel, the blowing of the shofar is v'chol me'odecha, to express your love to Hashem with all your possessions. That is something that we think about every day in the Shema. And the message of the shofar of Yovel is that we're all in it together, and that the more we can, and when we come together to do things, we find strength, we find inspiration, and we're able to fulfill the L'chol Ma'idecha, to serve Hashem with all our possessions. But in the meantime, when we find ourselves in a situation where we can't, we should find the strength from within, which is what Hashem wants us to do, to serve Him under these circumstances. And through that, we should merit to be able to come back together, to inspire each other, to energize each other, to be able to stand on our own 2 feet amongst others, and be strengthened even more with the energy that we gain from being with others and doing mitzvahs with others. We should be able to merit that very soon. And we should merit that in the ultimate form, when all the Jewish people come together in Eretz Yisrael by the Beis HaMikdash, finding strength from within and being energized from around them, from everybody coming together, with the coming of Mashiach, Behar-Bechukotai. And all those who need comforting and have to go through the challenge of being comforted, not in the regular way, not coming from others. Yes, coming from others, phone calls, which is a beautiful thing. But all those who need to find the comfort in many ways on their own, not being able to gain the comfort from others that are coming to feel the pain with them. May they be able to be given the comfort in this very trying situation. And again, we should all be able to merit the ultimate comfort that comes from the coming of Mashiach, Tzidkeinu Behar-Bechukotai. Amen. I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos.